Hello, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of the LeanTossup CDL podcast. I am your host, as always, Robert, and I'm joined by Ryan of CDLMetrics. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I am doing absolutely fantastic. One of my favorite times of year from like a sports perspective, we've got March Madness, which has technically already started, but first round kicks off tomorrow. I am a huge March Madness fan. Excited for that. We've got obviously COD to talk about, which we will do today. Kind of in the middle of Major 2, Stage 2. So that's exciting. We've got baseball around the corner, which is a sport I enjoy. So outside of like the start of football season, I would argue this is the best time of year if you're a sports fan like me. So yeah, super excited to talk about COD. And maybe some other markets. We'll obviously talk about the games, but we've got some interesting futures markets takes later on in the episode for sure. So yeah, excited to say the least.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree with that, and I'm excited for March Madness too. I've never really particularly been too involved with March Madness, but I'm intrigued this year. I think you got a couple teams that can make pretty deep runs, and it's not just Bet Gonzaga this year. I think there's some teams that can really give them a run for their money. But anyways, this is unfortunately not a March Madness podcast. This is a Call of Duty podcast. So while shifting from March Madness futures, let's talk a little bit about Call of Duty futures. So again, last week, again, Ryan and I, we both like to talk a lot. So we didn't really get to the futures market very much. So they actually, again, this is relatively new for Call of Duty betting. We actually have futures to win Major Two. Now, this has never happened before. Every single time that we've ever had one of these, it's always been like, oh, okay, this comes out like the week after the last qualifying match when the bracket's set, and then you make bets from there, which is fine. It's good. But now this is an unprecedented opportunity to make some bets early. So now you have futures to win the major, you have to reach the final, and going to let me see here. I'm gonna take a look here at Call of Duty here. So, yep. So you actually have you on Bovada at least. My book doesn't have it, but Bovada does. It had it before, but it's gone now. But on Bovada, you actually have MVP futures for Major Two. You also have on my book you have CDL Championship futures, which are interesting too. That's kind of a little bit it's a weirder market because like so for example for to win a major 2 optic is even money, but to win the championship they're plus 150. But if you look down, like Florida to win the CDL championship is 40 to 1, but to win major 1 they're 66 to 1. Or no, actually they're not anymore, not in this book. Oh, on sorry, so there's a huge discrepancy there. So on Bet365 they're 66 to 1 to win major 1. On Bovada they're 40 to 1 to win major 1. So that's a significant difference. Um so let's start talking about what picks we have. So I'll tell you some of the bets I've made. I already bet London to win at 7 to 1. I also have I have London 7 to 1. I have Toronto 10 to 1, and then also when Florida basically just laid down the hammer there on New York, the 3-0, which was their second 3-0 of the weekend. I snapped up Florida 66 to 1 to win Major 2. I know I was talking to you, and I'll let you talk about your rationale for it. You told me you bet Florida at 28 to 1 to reach the final. I'm happy I'm going to be able to reinvest and get that at very basically the same price on my book, not on but those prices are gone off Bovada now. They're down to 40 to 1, 25 to 1 um, for Florida, but every else's price is pretty much the same. So which prices do you like here? What are you looking at? What are you seeing? And also if you want to talk about the MVP market, because I don't particularly love anything in the MVP market. I'll let go ahead. You say what you like
Yeah,
here.
Yeah, for sure. I do see a little bit more value in the odds to reach the major final market than just the outright winner market. The outright winner market I'll talk about first because that's probably the more popular one and the one that really matters, I guess. Two teams I see a little bit of value with. First one is actually the top team on the board, which surprises me a little bit. Optic Texas are even money, which at first glance, I think to a lot of people who aren't huge Optic fans, that price seems steep. After I crunched the numbers, I ran 10,000 simulations using the most likely seeding outcome for Major 2. I didn't want to go through the headache of like putting every permutation of how the seeding could be. I just said, screw it, let me put in the most likely seeding based on expected win totals and run those 10,000 sims. Optic Texas win the tournament about 53% of the time, so a little bit of an edge there if it's even money. I'll talk about kind of pivoting off of that if you like Optic. What are other ways to go about it? But like at even money, it's not bad. They are already 1-0 so far. They played one of their harder matches of stage 2, having beat LA Thieves last Sunday. So they're already past, like maybe their hardest opponent, although Atlanta is on the horizon still. But outside of them, Thieves looked like the toughest competition for them. Maybe Florida or that now. We can get into that later. But yeah, Optic at even money, not horrible, honestly. And then the other team I kind of like on the futures market, yeah, Florida Mutineers. I have them winning the whole thing about 4% of the time, meaning, if you want to have a valuable bet on them, like a 25 to 1 ticket or better is good. I see them at 40 to 1 right now. That's even better. If you can get 66, yeah, you've mentioned you've seen that places. I've seen that too. Yeah, you're definitely getting a little bit of value there. Florida already 2-0 in the stage, so the odds that they make the winners bracket are very, very high. I have them winning 3 or more games 80% of the time, so they just need one more win to get that done, and their schedule isn't like super hard. They should be able to get at least one more, probably get a 4 or 5 seed, I would think. Um, so yeah, it looks okay for them to win the major, even a slight edge from my numbers. And where I really see value in them is to reach the major final. And part of that just has to do with I don't think Florida are on that optic or phase level yet. Last weekend was super impressive. They dramatically increased their stock. They increased the odds that they start in winners bracket, that they get a decent seed. All of that they did last weekend. Um, to win the major, they're gonna have to go through FaZe or Optic or maybe London, right? Any of these other teams who have been consistently good all year. And they'll probably have to go through 2 or 3 of those teams, maybe one of those teams twice, right? If they get bumped down to losers bracket and have to come back up. So the odds to win the major don't love, but to reach the major, I see 25 to 1 odds right now. I think those are good. I have them reaching the major about 14% of the time, so a 1 in 7 chance or so. And part of that has to do with they're very likely to start winners bracket. You can reach the major final by winning 3 matches in a row, which I don't think is out of the question. Like if they're best of 5 series, if Florida can take out their, first round opponent, whoever that might be, the 5, 6 seed, depending on where Florida ends up, I don't think it's out of the question to have them win 2 more matches. Now, granted, both of those might be against stiffer competition, but if Florida's stock keeps going up, if they keep performing like they did last weekend, it's going to make a lot of sense. So, Florida Mutineers, I like a lot. Now, obviously, this is a team that's very up and down. So, they could come crashing down and we could be sitting here like, oh, of course Florida did this because they always kind of do. But again, Florida are a team who can get hot and stay hot. So that's kind of what we're looking for in these futures markets, teams who could go nuclear and just rip off a bunch of games. We would need a team that starts in winners bracket because if you're starting in losers bracket, you have to win 5 games in a row to reach the major final. You have to win 6 in a row to win the whole thing. So that's just too tough. We can talk about the Thieves a little later and how it's looking for them because this major might be rough for them. But yeah, if we want to jump MVP market now, I already mentioned I do see a slight edge with Optic Texas to win the major at even money. They're minus 300 ish to reach the major final. I see less value in that. That's a really steep price to pay, even though they likely will make that major final. assuming they get a number one or number two seed and have a relatively easy path to that major final. But the MVP odds I think are really interesting for them. So let's just assume for a second that Optic win Major 2, right? And are starting the talks of like, are they the phase of this year? I think by then it would be yes, obviously. But so say they win the major final, who is going to win MVP? And I think the MVP market's a really interesting place to go. So Dashi right now is the overwhelming, I shouldn't say overwhelming favorite, but a very, very big favorite to win MVP, plus 175. And then the other Optic guys, Shotzi's third on the list at 3-1. Scump is sixth on the list at plus 750. And then Illy is one spot down from him at 10-1. So we think about MVP, right? It's not like a purely statistical award, right? There's some sort of human element to those types of things. Um, Dashi won the Major 1 MVP. Understandably, he was insane. I think if there is an Optic player that will get it at Major 2, it's likely him. He's been their best player all year. But I also think if they don't have to give it to Dashi, they like won't. If Dashi's close to one of his teammates, they're gonna want to give the award to somebody else. So I do see a little bit of value in Scump at plus 750 and Illy at 10-1. You can talk me into Shotzi a little bit. Um, but yeah, I've gone over their player grades over the last couple days. Honestly, Shotzi, Illy, and Scump are all pretty close to one another. All are above average players, and all are within 3 points of each other in the grading that we use. So, you just want one of those guys to get hot, and I'll take the cheaper prices with Scump and Illy over Shotzi. So I think if you like Optic, I think it makes sense to do that through the MVP market if you can. Um, I've kind of looked at the other players, right? I don't have any sort of really sophisticated model as to like which players are winning MVP by running simulations or anything, but I haven't been able to nitpick other teams that might win the major and if there's an MVP candidate I like. You mentioned Royal Ravens are a team you like. Zero is their cheapest player to win the major at 22-1, which at like first glance looks enticing. I have Zero as one of the better players on that team outside of Afro. But you break it down from a percentage perspective, it's like really anyone on that London team could win the MVP. They're a very balanced lineup. And a lot of the good teams are very balanced. So it's tough with MVP stuff like that, but if you wanna have just a little fun with it and get better prices on some teams you like, I think that's a good way to go.
Yeah, I think um, that's a really good summary of basically all those markets and what they mean. I completely agree with the fact of not trying to buy in on Dashi again. I think that they will. I think they will kind of try to spread it out a little bit. I think that if Optic wins multiple majors, I really struggle to see Scump not getting one of them. Right, I really
Right.
struggle to see him not getting one MVP. I like that's gonna happen, right? And again, if Optic does win this major, then like yeah, they might give it to Scump. I'm kind of a little bit more bullish on Shotzi and but Illy, but at the same time though, it really does depend on what they do and how they do it, right? It's really like I kind of think in some ways it's gonna go to the player who has the flashiest plays. And like if that's Dashi again, I guess it's just gonna go to Dashi, right? And like that sounds insane, but I don't. The thing of it is, I Dashi is a relatively inconsistent player, right? Like he has moments of just amazingness, right? Like again, you have him as your third ranked player, right? And we're seeing that right now. But at the same time, there's Dashi that's like 9 and 15 Dashi, right? Like, and I guess like as a team's firing on all cylinders, great. But Optic is classic. Again, this is why we love betting against Optic many times. They are classic and amazing at choking it away at times, right? And I think if we can, it's very possible that we can see that Dashi and that Optic again very soon, right? So I'm still iffy to buy Optic at like plus 100 to win the major. You can convince me a bit more at Scump's price to win MVP. Like Scump is at 750, Illy is at plus 1,000. Like that's a bit more. I'd be much more willing to buy that rather than um rather than kind of dashy at like plus 175. Rather just buy Optic to win the major at even money, right? So you're not getting a ton of savings there. An interesting one, and again, I kind of talked about Florida. I like the thing of it is, and this is my kind of case for Florida, is that again, for people who have been following the CDL for a couple of years, if you remember back to that back in the time of COVID when everything was remote, people will remember that Florida run when they won. It was one of the home series. I can't remember which home series it was, but they won one of the home series in absolutely dominant fashion. It capped off. It was ended off with a dominant 3-0ing of phase in a control. It was a not a control. Sorry, domination. It was domination. Then it was a three. It was a beat down domination on not London Docks. No,
Hackney,
the horrible one. What was the bad control?
Hackney
Hackney
Yard, I
Yard,
think.
yes. It's in
Yeah.
London too. That's what the confused. It is a London dock, but that's
Yeah.
the confusing part. But no, yeah, it ended with an absolute beatdown on that map. And then I believe Florida won the next major, if I'm not mistaken. And then they immediately fell, and then eventually got eliminated from champs by Toronto Ultra. So the thing of it is, and my argument here is, and again, you can argue, and I probably will invest at Florida to make the finals. I do love that bet. I still do love Florida to win outright at 60. I got it 66 to 1. It's at 40 to 1. I still think that's a considerable. Like, you could definitely consider that price. But if you're like, "Oh no, 40 to 1 is too steep of a price for me to pay," then guess what? Awakening to win MVP, that's 80 to 1. That's functionally Florida to win the major right there. Like there is so little difference between Awakening winning MVP and Florida winning. Like it is not like another like it is not worth an extra 40. It's not an extra 4. Well, that's not how you price it anyways, but the point is like if you want Florida to win the major, you don't want to pay 40 to 1, then you could pay 80 to 1 on Awakening to win MVP. Because again, Awakening, you actually have Awakening as your second best player next to Celium in the player grades, right? He's functionally tied with Dashi. So if Florida does win the major, then you could definitely make the case for this. Now, my model actually does really like Florida. It thinks it's definitely one of the better team, especially with the advanced stats. It definitely thinks it's some of the one of the better teams in the league. And it just that like with a major like this, like when you have the ability to buy into Florida at like 25 to 1, 28 to 1, 66 to 1, 80 to 1, 40 to 1, like when you have the ability to have that, and when Florida is such a streaky team, you want the ability to be like, oh, okay, like you would much rather be having that 66 to 1 or 40 to 1 or whatever ticket rather than being like, nah, they'll fade. Right? Like this is the thing, and like eventually they will regress 100%, but you would be much rather having that 66 to 1 ticket rather than being like, okay, no, I hope they're going to fade, right? Because this team is the stats on this team are amazing, right? I mean, you've got Awakening, possibly one of the best players in the game. You've got Skies, who's also very consistent. He's up there in the top 10 of your player grades as well. You've got Dave Patty, who again, that's a very strong case for rookie of the year. That's a definite potential buy there for Dave Patty as rookie of the year. And then you've also got Vivid, who's just solid, honestly. Like Vivid, maybe not has doesn't have the best player grades, but he's just raking in kills. Like some maps, he has like like some series, he has just a ton of kills, and it's a very strong team, like overall. And like when this team fires and they don't screw up things, like the series against Boston, when they like outkilled them, like outslayed them 25 on a hard point and lost the hard point, when they don't do dumb stuff like that, this team dominates. And like again, they're playing Optic this week. They play Florida next week. I like I have money on Florida to beat Optic this week, and depending on where that price opens up against Atlanta, I'm definitely going to be considering that as well. So I really, and again, like Optic didn't show us much last week, but again, we'll talk about the matches later. But yeah, no, I'm down for Florida, and I think Dave Patty might be rookie of the year too. That has to get some serious consideration here as well.
For
Um,
sure. Just to reiterate quick on the Florida love, I know we've been talking about him nonstop. MVP market, I do agree. Awakening, best player on the team. He is in MVP consideration if Florida is a better team at the moment, I think. He's been that dominant on the map. 80 to 1 is great. Yeah, you're getting Skies I see at 250 to 1, which is very enticing. Dave Patty's 500 to 1. Like, if you wanna get nuts with this, I don't think those are bad plays either. Like, if you wanna just sprinkle a little on everybody but Vivid or maybe just Awakening in Skies because 'cause they're the vets, like, there's a lot of ways you can play this, which is really exciting. And one other thing I wanna mention with Florida. So, if you think back on the futures market pre-Major 1, those odds were released just before Major 1. They weren't earlier in the stage. The teams that started in winners bracket, you saw like Thieves at a 5 to 7 to 1 price. Some of those other teams on the back end of winners bracket were, LAG, I'm trying to think, Minnesota wasn't, Boston was in there. They were hovering in the 12 to 1, 16 to 1 territory to win it all, which wasn't great. Right, you're getting a Florida price that at what I see is 40 to 1. They're already 2 and 0. Like, you're already almost penciling them into the winners bracket, and assuming their, rest of their qualifiers go okay, they likely won't have to play Optic or FaZe in that round 1 match. And we're just trying to avoid those teams when you're, right, betting an underdog. You want to avoid those dominant teams for as long as you can, right? Have some other team get the upset on them early if possible. So I think Florida are really well positioned for that to happen. I do worry that their fall off might happen with some tougher matches. Last weekend was pretty easy for them, but they still look dominant. And I liked what I see. I liked what I saw. I think they'll continue this for at least another couple weeks. And I'm not saying they're going to win the major, but I, Florida is like their time for a run is right now. So I would get on it right now if you can.
Yeah, and I think and that's the point really because like back in the old days of 2020 when we had the COVID season, like they won well, not majors. They won two home series at that point. But
Back to
like
back. Yeah.
yeah, but that was over a span of a couple months, right? Like those were not every week. You had like a week where we had a home series, then I think you had like a couple weeks off another home series, then you had like a month. Like there was some huge gaps in that schedule during that COVID season, right?
Mhm.
So, like, they could definitely cool off. The major is in like 2 weeks, right? Like the thing of it is, we're talking like 2 weeks from now, we're talking about our major picks because the first games start on Thursday, right? And at Florida, we like assuming Florida makes the winners bracket, they're playing in. Well, we're recording this on Wednesday night. We'll record that one earlier. We'll record that one on the Tuesday night, obviously, so we have some leeway to get to on before it gets out on Thursday night games. But like they're playing like 15 days from now in winners round one, assuming they make winners round one. But like that's the level here. Like this isn't like okay, well they're playing well now. How will they play for a month from now? No, like it's like 15 days from now. And again, if they show something against Optic this week, and then like again, I don't even know what that price against FaZe is. It's probably gonna depend on what FaZe does against Ultra. But like say they beat Optic, and like say they're like even money against FaZe or something. If they crush FaZe, what are they to win the major? 8 to 1. Like this is the thing, and like you're, and because the thing is, people want to figure out how to beat them yet. It's gonna take time. Like this Florida team peaks and they're steady. So like it's a very interesting thing. And again, you know what? It's called gambling, right? So we're just gonna ride out with Florida and see what they could do, right? But yeah, no, I'm excited for that Florida match. But anyways, enough about Florida, even though they are a very fun team. Let's talk about the matches this week. So, starting off this week, first game on Friday. Not a great one to start off with. We've got London Royal Ravens versus Paris Legion. London minus, so the spread's on Bovada here, minus 2.5 plus 115 for London. Paris plus 2.5 minus 150. London to win money line minus 1400. Paris plus 1675 on the money line. Over 3.5 minus 135. Under 3.5 plus 105. This is kind of hard to see Paris winning this game. Like really, really hard to see Paris winning this game.
Yeah. Yeah.
I yeah, I don't even really see anything I like in this. For some reason, Bovada doesn't have player spreads or like map spreads. I'm seeing, but on Bet365, I've got a 52.5 for map one hardpoint. That seems too low. It depends what that map is, right? If it's something like because Paris has gotten beat down on some of these hard points, right? If it's not a bocage, and even if it is a bocage, Like that might be a play. Minus 52.5, just map one spread. Um, minus 1.5 rounds in the search. Yeah, not great. Again, we don't have control rounds, but yeah, I don't hate that map on spread. Paris just has not been a good hardpoint team. They've really struggled in that. Again, this is kind of the series for Jimbo here. Jimbo came in last week. He had a very bad statistical week. Can he turn it up? Sure. Does that mean they're going to beat London? No. Right? Like this is the thing, right? It's not nothing against Jimbo, but like this might not be the match for them. This is gonna like he's got to make his mark. Could they maybe keep this close? Yeah, possibly. Like here's the thing: can they make this? Can they get this to game five? Possibly. I don't know. Remember the fact that London also is looking ahead. They're playing Phase the next day, so they could be more paying attention to Phase than whatever Paris is doing. But again, London is smart enough. If they win the coin flip, they'll veto Gavutus. But then again, if Paris wins the coin flip, they'll get Gavutus, right? So it's a hard call. What are you thinking here? I'm assuming you're going. Are you going minus 2.5, or do you think Paris can pull out a game win here?
Yeah, I'm avoiding this match. And honestly, I might be avoiding a lot of matches this weekend. Last weekend, I really liked London a lot, and they came through in a big way. I was very involved Friday and Saturday. Sunday rolls around, a lot of those prices on those matches were spot on, and so far what I'm seeing, the odds board looks pretty spot on. So as we get further into the season, it's gonna definitely be harder to find value on any of these teams. And yeah, this match is just it's tough with Paris, right? Because they looked so bad last weekend, and a lot of it, maybe all of it, was on Jimbo. And it's his first match in the league, so you might have the butterflies, he might be on high ping, whatever it is, but it was rough. The thing you worry about with this kind of matchup, and it's a thing I always worry about when one of the best teams is playing one of the worst teams. Um, Map pool might get a little funky, right? London play Atlanta the very next day. Do London treat this as a scrim and go, let's play Paris on the maps that FaZe are good at, or something like that? Let's play maps that we're maybe not the best at. So maybe they let a Bocage through. Again, I don't know if Paris would want to play that. Maybe, right? Just get Jimbo going, right? Play a really fast map. Maybe he gets hot. Maybe that carries over into maps 2, 3, 4, whatever it might be. So map set could be funky. That's the one thing I'll say. I don't really like anything. Yeah, I lean London to win in a sweep. I see a -1.5 at -450. Now that's obviously a really steep price to pay, but if you want to throw that in a parlay, I don't think it's bad. Um, right, if Paris win the coin flip, things get interesting. That you got to figure that too. Um, I don't know. It's a tough one to call. Obviously, London are going to win this. Um, but yeah, I mean, it could look like that Phase Paris series from stage one, where Paris took him to a game five, and it got a little nervous if you're on the Atlanta side. So that I could see this match going that way. I could see this being a London 3-0 and saying to myself, huh, obviously that was going to happen. So, yeah, a complete stay away from me, but I obviously lean London just because I've been high on them all year. I do think the market has caught up now to a point where I think people realize they're like the third best team in the league, arguably maybe second if you could put them over FaZe if you want. I'm not going to go that far, but yeah, London, well established team. They get Gizmo back. I only think that helps. As good as Paul X was last week, I think getting your guys back after some much needed time off is good for everybody. So I love London. I think they probably end up with the 1 or 2 seed at the major when all is said and done. And I think one of those wins that goes into that seeding is coming from here. And I think that's no surprise. I think we could just move on to the next match, Robert.
I think so. We talked enough about Florida. We need to talk about other net matches. And again, we move to a match that is also not very good. Seattle versus Optic. Seattle +2.5 -220. Optic -2.5 +165. Seattle to win on the money line +385. Optic to win -600. Over 3.5 minus 200, under 3.5 plus 150. Well, I'm seeing an immediate disparity there. So the under 3.5 is more expensive than Optic minus 2.5. Last time these teams played, I believe Optic swept them or won 3-1. I can't remember exactly which one it was. Um, Somehow Seattle has the ability to beat FaZe. I don't know how. My favorite theory on that is that someone in the Seattle Surge management said they swore on they wished on Monkey Paw, saying I wish we had a team that could beat FaZe, and then the Monkey Paw curled. Because here's the thing, right? Like they beat FaZe. They're now in the last 3 times they've beaten FaZe, they're 3-0, right? Going back to stage 5 in 2021, they beat them in the Kickoff Classic, and then they beat them here, but yet after that, they haven't won any of those events. They lost the Kickoff Classic in the final to Toronto. They got blown out by Optic and then by Paris in the major. Then they somehow turn around and beat FaZe. Like, what is this team just really good at beating FaZe? I'm not even particularly sure how they're good at beating only FaZe. Um, I don't know. I've got this as about a 3-1, but I could definitely make a case for a 3-0. The minus 2.5 at plus 165 doesn't seem horrible. I mean, I've got Optic just crushing them at hardpoint here, because they aren't. I mean, I was actually really lucky. For this match for Seattle FaZe, I bet FaZe spread on the hardpoint was like minus 47. They crushed them on the hardpoint. Then I was trying to bet Seattle plus 1.5 rounds with the control. Accidentally bet Seattle plus 1.5 rounds in the search and destroy. That won somehow, and I was like, cool, okay. And then I didn't bet anything else for the rest of the match, and I went plus, even though I thought FaZe was going to win. They didn't win. And sometimes when you see games like this, when you see stuff like when you see a team minus 1400 or minus 600 to win, sometimes the right play is just to pick small little pieces there, like pick a map spread here, a map spread there, and that's it. And I don't hate my Optic minus 2.5. Maybe you can look at a hardpoint spread. What's a map on hardpoint spread? Nothing on Bovada, but I've got minus 42.5 on Bet365. That's pretty attractive. Again, depending on what the hardpoint is, but Optic just has this just dominant hardpoint streak in them. What do you think here? Do you think Seattle is a bad team that can beat FaZe, or like an inconsistently good team? What do you think?
Yeah, I think them beating FaZe, I don't think it improved their stock. I mean, it did a little bit, and it hurt phases a little bit. But you got to remember, with all these matches, there's a percentage outcome the underdog wins, and even if that percentage is very low, like it was in Seattle's case, I gave them like, I don't even remember, less than a 20% chance to win that match. Meaning, like 1 in 5 times or less, 1 in 6, 1 in 7, they'll win the match. And, sometimes the underdogs do that. I think that was just the case. We look map by map in that Atlanta Seattle series, right? Atlanta come out and smoke them on Bocage. What's new? That's what Atlanta does to everybody. They did that to Seattle at the Kickoff Classic. Similar score line, again, 250 to 165. Atlanta, I'd love to see Atlanta, Florida Bocage, because I think that might be absolutely nuts. But yeah, Atlanta is going to win the Bocage hardpoint every time. Seattle gets a round 11 win in the game 2, so good for them. They stay alive in the series. Excuse me, Gavudu Control goes the way of FaZe in a round 5. I believe they won defense for that round 5.
They
We're
somehow
still
won
on,
that. They should have
yeah.
lost that. What was it, like a 2v9 they won? Well, it was something crazy. The FaZe
it
won that one.
Yeah, it was insane. But yeah, we're still on kills as the tiebreaker. I don't know if that's going to change this weekend. I don't think so. So we might play it out for another couple weeks like that. Anyway, Atlanta win the control. Then we go to Berlin hardpoint, which I think people are going to be surprised by. But I'm not super surprised by it. It was a 250 to 161 win for Seattle to force the game 5. Um, Atlanta, despite being good on Berlin the couple times they've played it, tend to veto that map a lot. This time they let it through and they did lose. And I will say Berlin, by far the most blowoutable map in Hardpoint. And I think the nature of why that is those money hills on that map are, for the most part, P1, P2, and P3. right? So P1 is like in that train station office area right away. P2 less of a money hill in that library, small little library room, um, connected to P5, and then P3 obviously back by fire, down the street, deep, deep. If you secure spawns, you're looking really good on that. Because P1, P2, P3 are those money hills, that's kind of why you see a lot of blowouts on that map. If you can win back to back rotations, you're probably going to win by a lot. It's very, I will say you can get close games if you have that team that's losing hold those money hills back to back to back. We saw that with Minnesota versus Optic in stage one, right? Minnesota were down like 80 or 90, I want to say, but you can chain those hills together if you rotate early. So the 90-ish point win by Seattle, not super surprising considering Atlanta likes to veto that map. And then the Berlin Search was a 6-2 win by Seattle, pretty dominant overall. So good on them. They got both searches. They got their hardpoint map as well. But I don't know. There's still some to be desired with Seattle, I think. That being said, this match, again, not one I love. If you're gonna make me pick something, I do lean. Is it the -2.5 +2.5? Yeah,
Yeah.
I lean a little bit Seattle +2.5. I know it's a steep price to pay. I just think I don't know that they're good enough in search that I think they could take that game two and it not get swept. Similarly, if they win the coin flip, they'll get preferred control map. Now, I do have them as underdogs regardless of the control map they play, but you start to add those things up, right? If they win the coin flip, that's a 50-50 proposition. They'll get their hard point map pick, they'll get their control map pick, and they'll at least start on defense in that game two search. So you could kind of make a case for that surge to not get swept narrative. But again, just a really hard one to figure out. Optic, I don't want to say struggled last week. They played one match versus Thieves. They won it in a game five, round 11. They clutched up huge. They won round 10 and round 11. Round 11, they were down a man. They did get first blooded. So they clutched up in a big, big way. Um, a really back and forth series for Optic and LA Thieves. So yeah, I don't think I'm changing my quote unquote stock prices for either of these teams. Texas is still far and away better. Um, but yeah, I would lean to Seattle can at least take a map off of them. Most likely the Surge because you're right. Their hard point has been rough throughout the whole year. Even Kickoff Classic when they look really good, hard point was not their game mode. And they've looked okay in control, but Optic are still the best team in that mode. So it's honestly, it's a narrow path for them to win. Seattle, I think you're going to have to do it in a similar way you did with FaZe, right? Take both search and destroys, and then maybe get your control map win or steal your hardpoint map. One of those. So that's what I got to say about this match. A really interesting one, I think, far and away more interesting than London Paris, just because there's a little bit of intrigue with both of these teams. But yeah, lean Seattle, but don't love it.
I mean, I guess that like the thing of it is again, you don't have to put anything on this yet. We can wait for the maps and then
True.
like if Optic wins the coin flip, then Optic 3-0. Right? Like if they're playing if it's Bocage, I don't even know what the thing, but like if the hard point isn't like Berlin, then like I don't hate it for Optic 3-0, right? Especially if it's a good if it's Tuscan control 3-0, right? Like something like that. But the other thing is that I think the interesting point you about Berlin hard points and stuff, especially for Atlanta, is my feeling is at least that Berlin is kind of a more classical hardpoint map. It's a more classic hardpoint, whereas like Bocage is like not classic at all. Like it's classic that you have a couple of money hills, you get a break, and that there's not a contest fest at the break. Like if you put them on a sliding scale, like Bocage is obviously on the like the most contest one, and Berlin is like the least contest one next to kind of Gavutu. So, like, I think in some ways maybe FaZe struggles with that one the most because they're more of a gunfight team. They want to get into those gunfights, and Berlin just doesn't give them the option to do it. So it's kind of interesting that maybe the second we saw that it was going to be a Berlin, we should have been like, yeah, okay, maybe Seattle can win that, and then by that point, all you gotta do is get to a search. Which again, Atlanta has struggled with search. They are not nearly as dominant as they have been at search in the past. And I don't know if that's a game thing, if it's a Vanguard thing. 'Cause again, they were not that dominant in search well, they were pretty dominant, but they were not like the most ever dominant at search in Modern Warfare. But at the same time, um, they took Paris to a game 5, and then now they lost to Seattle in a game 5 too. So it's interesting. Like, see, apparently FaZe likes blowing out good teams, but then they love like beating Toronto up 3-0 or London 3-1, but then they'll lose to Seattle in 5. So I don't know. I kind of agree that the best play here is to kind of leave this alone. If I had to bet something, I'd lean Optic 3-0, but I'd wait for the map set. Again, see what the game on hardpoint is. If it's something that Optic can blow them out on, then just take Optic spread map 1 and sit back and enjoy the blowout. Um, yeah, we could. So again, so now for the third match on Friday, again we can begin to this match pretty quickly on Friday. A Minnesota Rocker versus Boston Breach. On Bovada, Minnesota plus 1.5 minus 240. Boston minus 1.5 plus 180. Minnesota minus 115 on the money line. Boston minus 115 on the money line. So again, dead even, or as even as a game on as even as an esport is. Usually there's a bigger vig on esports than there are in the NFL. I think the NFL goes down to minus 110, minus 110. I think for a pick, yeah, generally depends on the book, but generally minus 110, minus 110. So there's like a slightly bigger. So like an even here is minus 115, minus 115. Over 4.5 plus 150. Under 4.5 minus 200. Um, Here my model has this basically exactly 50-50 as well, but I kind of like Breach here, honestly. I think my model really likes Minnesota as a search team, but I really like Boston in the hard points. So I'm leaning like I like Boston to win, and I wouldn't hate sprinkling a little bit on the minus 1.5 because you can make a very clear case for Boston 1-2-4, and then that's a 3-1, right? So I don't hate that at all. I think it's a lot harder for Minnesota. It's definitely a lot harder for Minnesota to win this. And Boston plus 1.5. Again, you can't really. Well, you can get it on Bovada. What is that on Bovada? Um,
Minus 275 is what I saw
yeah, that's
last.
parlayable, I believe. I don't know. It's not the greatest parlay, but it's something you can parlay. But yeah, I don't hate that at all. I get the hard point spread again. Depends on what hard point they're playing, but no hard point spread on Bovada on Bet365. I've got game one hard point spread as minus 17.5. Um, I have Boston. Well, they have Boston getting. You can get Boston plus money in the search, which is not which is definitely possible, and then Boston plus 150 to win the control. So I actually kind of do like Boston here. I think Boston does win this. I think the market's gone from like because originally people were so overhyped on this Boston team. They're like, this Boston team's amazing, and then they immediately got blown out by I can't remember who it was. Someone just crushed them, and we were all on the team that crushed them. And then they went to the major and then they beat Florida. We were all on Florida there. Then Boston. Yeah, that was then people were all on Paris against Boston for some insane reason. We were all over Paris on that. All over Boston against Paris, even though the public was on Paris. And then Toronto versus Boston, which is very close. We're going to talk about that game a little bit later, but then Toronto eliminated them. But now I think we've kind of reacted too much the other way, where people think Boston is not like an amazing team. But I actually kind of think they are a top team in the league. They're probably a top. Well, what's my ranking have them at? I've got them as seventh. So they're a top 8 team. Like I think they should be about even money to beat Phase. Like not Phase Thieves. I might take them over Thieves to be honest with you. Like I think they're a top 6 team in the league. I think they're not bad, but they're not. I mean, they're basically where we thought they are. But I kind of think the market is kind of too low on this Boston team. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Are you taking Boston here? Are you taking Minnesota? Clearly, this is the best game of the week here, of the Friday at least. What do you think here? Are you with me
For
on?
sure.
Yeah, you with me on
Yeah,
Boston?
yeah, these again, another match that I don't love because these prices are pretty spot on. I've got Minnesota winning 51% of the time. Um, Yeah, it's pretty accurate with these lines. The one thing I will say is Minnesota's last weekend. Like, how much of a concern was that? Because they played Toronto, first match of the week, or not the first match, their first match of the weekend, and lose 3-1 pretty convincingly. The only game they won was a 6-5 search on Tuscan, where they were up 5-0. They let Toronto come back 5-5, and then Minnesota get the round 11 win. So they squeaked out that search when all was said and done. Outside of that, a pretty convincing win by Toronto on Voodoo Hardpoint, a really convincing win on Tuscan Control, and another convincing win on Tuscan Hardpoint. So Minnesota, it wasn't a sweep, but they got blown out by Toronto. Um, and then the next match, right? Paris. It was nerve wracked. Like, as a Minnesota fan, I was super worried about them once they got down 2-0 to Paris because right the game one Tuscan Hardpoint they throw away. They lose 250 to 248 to arguably the worst or second worst hardpoint team in the league in Paris Legion. We were on Standy's POV right at the end of that game. He kept snaking in and out of the hill, cost him valuable seconds, and you end up losing by two. So that stung.
I want to talk about
Y-
that for a second.
Go ahead.
I like think he either I like my favorite conspiracy theory on that, and like either he bet or he had his friends bet against him on map one. Like I swear, like there's no way you can justify that. Like how do you you're down 2 seconds, and the thing of it is you see it right on there. It's like because like when you're contesting the hard point, it says right in the middle of your screen contesting the hard point, right? Like he knew. Like it's hard to not view that as like a deliberate attempt to throw the game.
That's fair. I think looking back on it, he was obviously very concerned about a push through you.
It was two
Right? He was.
seconds.
I know. I it's you're that close. I will say also with this game, right? Things get mixy. That Tuscan P1 can get mixy, very contest heavy. Maybe in all that chaos, right? When games end like that, it is just chaos. Like it's very easy to lose composure. Maybe he thought he had a teammate who was in hill with him at the time or who was about to, so that if he snakes out, they're still holding the hill. So I think he maybe stopped doing that because he did it at least twice, where he snaked out to check mid, came back, got a second, snaked out again. Yeah, like yeah, it was one of the weirder hard points of the year. And yeah, one that stung pretty bad. I don't know if he intentionally threw. I think it was just a crazy chaotic hard point. And honestly, Minnesota are known for losing games like that. Like they have a lot of heartbreakers in them too. They obviously have some huge clutches, but that's just kind of what Rocker are. And I choose to cheer for them. And then yeah, the search and destroy game two. You hoped for a bounce back. It was Paris's maybe most convincing search and destroy win of the year, 6-3. They've struggled big time in that mode the entire year, but that was pretty dominant against one of the best search teams we've seen so far this year. So after that game two, I was really nervous. Just thinking back before the stage even started, I had Minnesota as the easiest schedule in the league, like by a decent margin. Part of that is they get to play Paris, they get to play New York, they don't have to play FaZe, they don't have to play Optic, and they were staring down the barrel of an 0-2 start. But thankfully, maps 3, 4, 5, very convincing for Rockers, so they do kind of bring it back, right? If maps 3, 4, 5 or maps 1, 2, 3, it's a sweep, but it it wasn't. So that being said, Minnesota Boston, I don't have a lean on. I guess you make a good case for Boston. I do think they are. I don't want to say a hotter team, but they have their shit together, right? Like they've been fairly consistent all year. Um, I trust the SMGs on Boston a little more than Minnesota, right? You worry about Minnesota's roll shuffle, putting attach on the AR. A lot of people like that move. I think it will work. I don't know. It might not make a huge difference. It might make them worse. That's the thing. It didn't show in the first weekend that um, it was a significant upgrade to put attach on the AR and priest on an SMG. So yeah, there's still a lot to be desired with Minnesota. With Boston, it's still control woes for them. Um, and it's only one map that you have to play, but it's really, really, really bad. Like if they win the coin flip again, you put yourself in such a bad position, right? They're not taking advantage of coin flips that go their way is kind of what I'm trying to say. When you're that bad at control, like who cares if it's Gavudu or Tuscan, right? You're 1-6 on Gavudu, you're 1-3 on Tuscan. You're generally getting blown out on both maps, losing defenses consistently. So that has to get cleaned up. I do think their hard point is fine. I think their search and destroy is solid. Um, yeah, slightly into Minnesota, 51%, but unless this line shifts a lot, this is another stay away for me. An obviously hugely consequential match. Like loser of this match is in jeopardy of starting in losers bracket. If Minnesota lose, they'll move to 1-2. With that being said, the rest of their schedule looks okay. They still get to play subliners. If Boston loses, they're only 1-1. But it's a big match for tiebreakers too. These teams are probably going to be on that cusp of winners bracket or not. So if tiebreakers play a role, this match is going to be important. So yeah, obviously the best one on Friday. It could go either way. And yeah, I think if Minnesota takes it, it's a 3-2. If Boston wins, it's a 3-1. Um, if you're going to make me throw something in a parlay, I don't hate Minnesota plus a map and a half. I know that means they'll probably have to take a hard point in there, but if they win the search, which I still think they're the better search team, and can win the control, which they're a clearly better team than Boston on, that cashes too. So yeah, a hard one to call because it could go any which way.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it with Boston, and I maybe sprinkle a little bit on the -1.5. Um, Again, depends on the map set too. Again, we don't have to make a decision on this until we get the map set right. So, and again, maybe you could take a different, like if it's a good hard point for Boston, maybe take a little bit on the minus on the game one spreads or whatever for Boston. Moving on, now we have a definitely one of the better games on Saturday now. Um, Fays versus Ravens. Fays -1.5 +130. Ravens +1.5 -170. Fays money line is -175. London +135. Over 4.5 +165. Under 4.5 -220. I'm on Ravens on this. I my model has this as basically dead even. I've got Ravens about a 48% chance, so there's some value there at the +135. I kind of think this goes to 5. I really do think that this week is going to be a really good week. This Saturday is going to be an amazing day for games. All these games are interesting and fascinating in their own way. Um, I really like. I take Ravens here. I take maybe Ravens +1.5. It's possible that this phase team really had it going there in the stage one, basically the major there, when they just came out and crushed London 3-1. But this is not the same team anymore. I've got them a lot closer in hard point now. I've got Ravens favored in SND, which is again that what they won. I've got FaZe favored in control, but again, if you force FaZe on Agavatu, I definitely don't hate Ravens on Agavatu. Um, what are your thoughts here? I know you're high on Ravens. I'm kind of high on them here too. I think they definitely have a chance to win this game. What do you think?
Yeah, I've never said this at all this year, but I think it's especially true in this match, and I think there are huge problems with me saying this. The winner of the coin flip will win this match. And I don't think that's good. As someone who's
What is competitive integrity?
yeah, exactly. Like and I was actually thinking about it this past weekend. If you're the Call of Duty League and you're going to make pre-scheduled matches throughout the year, why do a coin flip to determine team A, team B and just right? If you're scheduling those matches, just make 10 of them home games, quote unquote, and make 10 of them away games, right? So that it's perfectly balanced. Because at the end of the year, like, I'm sure someone's keeping track of coin flips. There's probably going to be a team that in their stage, like in their qualifying matches, wins 15 of the 20 coin flips. And there's going to be another team on the other end that wins five. And it's like, well, yes, coin flips are fair, theoretically, but like the distribution of who gets team A, team B is not gonna be. Um, yeah, and I think this match is really is gonna be a clear example of that because you're right, the control matters a lot. Atlanta on Gavudu control 2-4 overall. I have them power ranked as the eighth best team on that map. Tuscan control 6-2. I have them power ranked as the best team on that map. Go to London Royal Ravens. Gavudu is their better map, not great. 5-3, I have them fifth overall, and Tuscan 1-3, I have them at 10th overall. So you're talking about, I mean, that's the series, right? These teams are, I think, are really, really close in hard point. Super close in search. They're number one and number two in first blood percentage. Atlanta is, I think, still kings of search and